The spaceship Avalon is on its way to a colonized world called Home 2. All of its quarters are empty and the ship is operating on autopilot. The 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers are in a state of hibernation. The Avalon passes through a belt of steroids, one of which weakens the ship's defenses, causing various system malfunctions. By mistake, one of the hibernation capsules is activated, triggering the awakening process of mechanical engineer Jim. The man learns that he has spent 120 years in anabiosis, and in 4 months the ship will arrive at its destination. Jim confirms his identity and then receives instructions about his quarters and the major activities he must participate in before arriving on the planet. Excited about his upcoming meeting with the other humans, Jim goes to the automated training room. Anxiety grips the man as the hologram explains the situation on planet Earth. Jim learns that the world we knew is facing an overpopulation problem. The man persists in trying to find out where all the other humans are, but realizes that the hologram cannot answer these questions. When he reaches the main lobby of the ship, he finds an automated information desk and asks it to contact a real person. He is sent to the steward, who is not there. He is equally disappointed when he goes to talk to the ship's captain. Jim gradually realizes that none of the main crew is awake from hibernation. And when he gets to the observatory, he finds out that the ship is actually in the 90s of the flight to Home 2. It turns out that as a result of a system malfunction, Jim woke up too early. An engineer tries to send a message to Earth asking what he should do to return to hibernation. However, the system informs him that it will take about 55 years to communicate with the Earth in order to get an answer. After this, Jim is completely devastated. He wanders around the ship and finds a bar where he sees another man. A bartender named Arthur pours him a drink. A few seconds later, however, Jim notices an oddity in the bartender, and soon realizes that Arthur is actually an android. The next day, Jim discovers that most of the dishes on the menu are reserved for gold-class passengers only. He takes his coffee and tries to figure out how to fix the hibernation pod. Getting the necessary tools, the engineer activates the capsule, but nothing happens. He also fails to break through to the crew of the ship. Jim begins to frequent the bar for a drink, but mostly to talk to his only companion. The android gives the engineer some advice, convincing him to move to one of the gold class rooms and try to have some fun on the ship. Jim starts going to restaurants and movie theaters, getting to know his entertainment system, but a whole year of loneliness slowly begins to drive him crazy. Once drunk, Jim stumbles upon an airlock with spacesuits designed for spacewalking. Once outside the ship, the man is mesmerized by the view. Disabling the magnets on his boots, he floats in space and feels even more devastated. Jim returns inside the ship ready to end it all. He intends to go into outer space without a spacesuit, but at the last moment he abandons the idea, and in his haste to leave the room he slips on a bottle he once threw. Jim gets up and his attention is drawn to a woman named Aurora, sleeping in one of the pods. The man finds her files in the catalog, reviews interviews with her, and thinks about her for days on end. After a while, Jim becomes obsessed with the irony of the whole situation. Going to another planet for a better life, he wakes up early, and now he definitely will not get there. And he finds his beloved only to realize how unattainable she is to him. He expresses all these experiences to the android, and the engineer gets the idea to wake up Aurora. The man realizes that if he does this, he will condemn the girl to death along with himself on the ship. Eventually, unable to let go of the thought, Jim decides to bring the girl out of hibernation after all. Jim activates the girl's capsule, and after making sure she wakes up, escapes to her room. He tricks Aurora by pretending that her pod opened early, as did his, due to a malfunction on the ship. Jim tells her that they are the only ones awake, and that the ship's crew cannot be reached. The girl panics and wants to return to her pod immediately. However, Jim explains that there is no special equipment on the ship that can help them return to sleep. After they return to the lobby and Jim sends Aurora off to rest. Sitting at the bar, the man feels guilty and regrets what he did. He asks the android not to reveal the reason for the girl's awakening. The next day, Aurora tries to learn as much as she can about the hibernation pods. Jim joins her and they have breakfast together. Meanwhile, minor malfunctions and system failures are occurring throughout the ship. After learning that Jim has been eating the same breakfast for over a year, the girl gets him a tray from the gold class menu. They teach about the possibility of fixing the capsule, but unlike the man, Aurora is not ready to give up. The girl searches the medical bay, goes through the research documents, and eventually ends up in the crew's hibernation room, trying to crack the door, which Jim never succeeded in doing. It's been more than a week. Aurora is writing about her life on Avalon, running and swimming in the pool. Increasingly aware of her situation, she decides to interview Jim, thinking his story might be interesting. When asked, why did he emigrate? Jim answers not immediately, but then opens up to the girl and explains that in the new world he could become someone and build his new life. Later, Aurora shares her story as well. Unlike the other passengers on the ship, she has a round-trip ticket. Her idea was to go to Home 2, live there for a year and return to Earth, becoming the first journalist to ever do so, and writing the greatest story ever. After a while, Aurora gradually gives up on finding a way to fix their situation. Jim wants to cheer her up and takes her to dances, movies, and the basketball court. Finally, the engineer takes the girl to a bar to meet Arthur. She relaxes a little for the first time in a long time until she is reminded of their situation again. Jim is left alone with Android, and tells Arthur that he feels terrible about what he did. Finally, Jim decides to ask the girl out on a date. Jim shows the girl the open space, and a romance begins between them, which, over time, gathers momentum. Aurora moves into Jim's quarters. They begin to live together, running together, eating together, sleeping together. Jim continues to explore the ship and finds a hydroponics compartment, after which the engineer brings the girl fresh flowers. One day the ship passes by a red giant, and they go to the observatory to view this splendor. On Aurora's birthday, after a year of a relationship, Jim decides to propose to the girl. In the evening in a bar over casual conversation, due to a misinterpretation of the nuances of human communication, the android tells Aurora that she was awakened by Jim. The girl becomes enraged and runs away. Jim returns to his room and discovers that all of Aurora's things are gone. The girl begins to avoid any interaction with him. One day, on the verge of despair, Aurora bursts into Jim's room at night and beats him with her fists, threatening to finish him off. All of Jim's attempts to apologize and explain the motive for his actions fail to resonate in Aurora's heart. She cannot forgive the man for taking her life. After a while, Aurora finds a tree in the main lobby that Jim had previously planted. The girl is amazed, but this does not lead to a reconciliation. Both of them increasingly notice malfunctions on the ship, and suddenly the voice of the senior assistant captain comes over the broadcast system, asking who planted the tree on the ship. Aurora and Jim run into the lobby and meet Gus, who doesn't understand how the 3 hibernation pods could have malfunctioned. He leads them to the captain's bridge and the 3 of them search for the malfunction manually, as the diagnostic system was not working. Gus discovers that only 2 of the pods malfunctioned, and upon learning that Jim woke Aurora, he condemns the guy, saying that he killed the girl. Gus clearly has health problems, and after a while he feels worse and worse. At night, unable to sleep, the girl decides to swim in the pool. Suddenly the gravity system fails all over the ship and the girl almost dies. Jim, who was asleep at the time, breaks his nose. The assistant captain discovers what really happened to the ship 2 years ago. It turns out that these malfunctions could eventually lead to the death of everyone on board, so their task, to fix the malfunction. In the maintenance bay, Gus loses consciousness. A scan in the medical capsule reveals that Man 612 has pathologies caused by a malfunction in his capsule, and he has a few hours to live. Before he dies, he asks them to take care of each other and save the ship. Gus hands Jim his captain's bracelet. An alarm goes off throughout the ship, and the ship's malfunctions become as critical as possible. Upon reaching the maintenance room, Jim and Aurora stumble upon a compartment that has been depressurized. After patching the hole, Jim realizes that the meteorite that perforated the ship made more than one hole. The engineer discovers that the meteor hit the reactor control computer. All attempts to restore the reactor operation prove unsuccessful. Jim guesses that the only way out is to cool the reactor by opening the ventilation door outside the ship. At the airlock, Jim gives Aurora a bracelet because he knows perfectly well that he may not return. Aurora helps Jim put on his spacesuit and says she can't live on the ship without it. While at the vent door, Jim realizes that he will have to manually hold it until the reactor cools down. Aurora doesn't like this at all. They argue, but in the end Jim convinces the girl that he has to do it. The operation eventually succeeds, but the pressure throws Jim out into space. The engineer's tether breaks and the pressure in his spacesuit drops. Jim apologizes to Aurora again and closes his eyes for lack of oxygen. The girl rushes to the airlock and puts on a spacesuit to escape into space. She miraculously manages to grab Jim. In a panic, the girl struggles to drag the man to the medical bay, where she discovers that he is already dead. Aurora uses Gus' bracelet to bypass protocols or resuscitate Jim. The capsule does its job and brings Jim to his senses. Aurora then tells him that she forgives him. Avalon continues on its route. Aurora and Jim arrange a proper funeral for Gus. After a while, Jim finds the hidden settings of a medical capsule that allows him to bring one of them back to sleep. He suggests that the girl go into hibernation and continue this journey. However, Aurora refuses and decides to spend the rest of her life with Jim on the ship. In the final scenes of the film, we are shown that 88 years later, the Avalon arrives at the planet Home 2. The ship's crew wakes up and sees a veritable garden in the main lobby. The Aurora has left a message for them describing their life story with Jim. This is the end of the film. Thank you all for watching. Please like this video. Write in the comments what you think of this movie, and see you in new videos.